The NCAA is bringing a 2-minute warning to college football. At least that's on the way. It looks like very seriously from the Football Rules Committee, which voted that in as a recommendation earlier this week. Um, Here's what Steve Shaw, who used to be the officiating director in the SEC, had to say about this coming change, which will affect all college football from here on out. It says Steve says the 2-minute warning timeout will allow all end of half and end of game timing rules to be simplified and synced up to this moment. This will also help broadcast partners avoid back-to-back media timeouts. So, I'm not sure. So, just to be real clear, first of all, there are like runoffs that occur in the final 2 minutes of the game. If you're in penalty situations, they're stopping up the clock when you get a first down. That's not always the case in the other parts of the game. But in the last 2 minutes of each half, that's the case. So I guess what I'm trying to, I mean, I'll be honest with you, it sure seems like this is just going to be the rule for the NFL moving. Moving to NFL rules as it relates to a 2-minute warning at the end of the game. That could really substantially change the way that tight games are have the outcome of tight games, because instead of 3 timeouts, you'd have 4. So that is the NFL model, and I don't think it's necessarily bad. I don't care what it does with TV. I mean, like, people complain about the games are too long. I mean, what are you like? No, they're not. There's it. What difference does it make if a game is 3 hours and 10 minutes, or 3 minutes, 3 hours and 20 minutes? I mean, that's what we're talking about here in terms of the complaints about people just want to complain. And honestly, now I'm going to complain about the complaining. It gets kind of aggravating and annoying that we're talking about 10 minutes. Like, if you don't want to worry about those 10 minutes, just don't watch those 10 minutes of the game. The vast majority of games that Georgia plays are not longer than 3 hours and 30 minutes. The reason why NFL games are shorter, there's a couple of different reasons. First of all, the halftime's about 8 minutes shorter in real time, 8 minutes. So that saws off about 8 minutes of time. The other thing, typically in an NFL game, they don't stop the clock for hardly anything except in the 2-minute period of time that we're talking about now for college football. So for years, college football stopped whenever, stopped the clock until it was blown in after a first down. They stopped the clock on whenever anyone went out of bounds. In the NFL, the clock just doesn't stop. So it's essentially a running clock unless there's, a touchdown, unless there's a scoring play, or someone runs, or there's an incomplete pass, with the exception of the 2 minutes. So this is not going to affect all games. That's not a completely accurate statement. Of course, it will occur in all games. But, if Georgia's beating Vanderbilt 37-10, then it's irrelevant that there's a 2-minute warning. Okay, so the original, here's a quick history lesson for those of you who are unaware. The 2-minute warning is a thing that occurred in the NFL because of time being kept on the field in the 60s and the 70s. So for decades, there was a 2-minute warning that made sure that, okay, there's 2 minutes left to go in this half or in this game. It allowed the officials to tie up the scoreboard with what they had on the field. So if we didn't have digital. I mean, like, everybody's watching this. Most of you probably do not remember a time when television didn't have the score up here with the time. That in the 80s and a lot of the 90s, the score and the time, that was not on the screen. So typically speaking, the audience didn't know what was going on. On the field, at the game, the scoreboard was always there, and you always saw the clock. That was not always the case. There was a lot of innovation that came in when Fox got the contract for the NFL in the early 90s, and a lot of the networks, adopted what, they did in sports. So now we have down and distance. Now we have the yellow line, which is an approximation of first down. Now we have running clock. We didn't have that for a long time. This makes sense to some degree in terms of, okay, there's 2 minutes left in this game and the rules are changing. Um, I understand that. That to me is the number one reason why you would do this. It's a notification that the rules of timing are changing right at this particular second. What I don't think is necessary about this is that it's being we're including the TV part of it in there, and a lot of folks just are not gonna sort of agree with that, understand it, because most of them don't understand it. But uh, I don't mind this. This will definitely matter in tight games. For instance, a year ago against Alabama, Georgia, I think only had 2 timeouts. I'm gonna have to go look this up now. Now that I talk about it, right in the middle of talking about it, I'm gonna look it up. But I'm pretty sure, excuse me, at the end of Georgia Bama 2023, there were only Georgia, I believe, only had 2 timeouts left in that game. And so that kind of made things more complicated as the game closed. But let's just assume that that's the case. Okay. No matter what, if you are down a score and you're in the late game situation, all this is going to mean is that you have an extra timeout. I mean, in NFL games, the the last 2 minutes of the half, like both teams tend to have the ability to score, which is just wild to me. I mean, it's just a bizarre situation, but those quarterbacks are so phenomenal that you often get that. The game is played at a different speed often in the league. Let me see real quick. Yeah, so Georgia burned a timeout. That's correct. They did, as I remember. So Georgia burned a timeout with in the Alabama game with 2 minutes and 54 seconds left to go in that game, and then they scored on the next play, leaving 2 minutes and 52 seconds to go. Alabama got the ball and got a first down with a 30-yard run. But then they got into a situation where, had Georgia stopped them on the next, it was 2nd and 8, I believe, and that would have been a scenario where Georgia could have gotten multiple timeouts. They would have had the 3 timeouts to stop the clock. Now, they didn't stop them. That was part of the problem. But my global point is that, you're going to be in situations at the end of games like Missouri was with Georgia at the end of that game, or like Ohio State wasn't a great example. But I think I know, if you watch football, particularly in the NFL, and you watch it in college, which the vast majority of y'all do, that timing scenario, the timing scenarios there, they're just coming to college football. And, it's just what it is. I mean, it doesn't necessarily bother me one way or the other, but it is a substantial change, and that's going to matter at the end of games. I think particularly, I don't think that it will matter as much at the end of halves. I might be wrong about that, but I think it's the end of games where it's going to really be problematic. But the plays, there's a running clock. Okay, so as an example, this is the second year in a row that there were going to either be new or proposed new timing changes in the NCAA. So a season ago, with the exception of the last 2 minutes of the game, the clock just ran. So that's why some of the college football games were faster this season. They weren't so fast that it was like, oh, we're getting out of here in 3 hours. It's not like a baseball. Like, baseball really did have a problem with timing. Like, there's no reason for you to be at a baseball game for 3 hours and 30 minutes. I mean, there's just no reason for it. But now I think you're going to see fewer and fewer plays. That's another part of college football that I think coaches would like because of player safety. But the reason why they're doing is something I've explained. What the ramifications for this will be, I'm not sure if I'm smart enough to know beyond what I've said at the beginning here, which is that the close of game scenarios are going to be different in college football from here on out.